And if ye suffer for righteousness' sake, happy are ye. And be ye not afraid of their terror, neither be troubled, but sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. That is 1 Peter 14 and 15. 3, 14 and 15. Important to give the chapter there, but welcome back to another episode of Thinking Well. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Tom.
We have a special guest with us today. The man I think I've known the longest in my life for 27 years now. He's my father, Ryan Reeves.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Ryan.
I am your father.
How are you?
I'm well.
Good.
Thank you for having me, boys.
Good to have you here.
Absolutely. You know, when we first started this podcast, we kind of had an outline of different kind of episodes that we wanted to have. And we've tackled a lot of what we call truth nuggets. Still waiting for that brand deal, Chick-fil-A. You know, some of the other ones we wanted to have on were missionaries. We wanted to have church members. We wanted people to have their testimonies, you know, be able to express that here. So I think we're going to do that today. I think we're going to have Ryan kind of dive into his testimony. Hopefully it'll be helpful to our listeners, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sounds good. Honestly, when we first started talking about coming on and being a guest, I thought we might dive into something more apologetics related. So, shameless plug for myself for later. Anytime you want to talk about evolution, I'm down.
Next time.
Yeah, for
Next
sure.
time.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. So, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, I have the luxury, I guess, of knowing a lot of your testimony, and I think it's powerful. I think there's, you know, I'll let you tell what you want to tell, but I think there's powerful stories. You know, I think, I'll say it this way, the angel story, I think you should definitely tell that one. That one's gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. But I don't know, just kind of start. I mean, I know, you know, you're, you know, I obviously I know you very well. I know your parents very well. So it's like, you know, just kind of start, you know, your teenage years and just kind of tell me how you got here.
Well, why don't I start a little bit younger than teenage years? So I was so blessed to be born into a Christian home, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners identify with that. But my parents have been Christians a long time, and on my dad's side, I mean, you know, a long line of preachers and Christian men and women, you know, I think sometimes you look back, maybe when you're younger, you don't realize the significance of it, being churched young, you know, in a gospel preaching church that, you know, teaches the Bible and nothing more, nothing less, right? But when I was 7, living in Casa Grande, Arizona, we went to a small church, Victory Baptist. My mom still goes there. And they used to meet in this old building that was like an old army barrack or something. It was this old torn down, broke down building. It was the best the church had, right? And I don't remember exactly what the message was about. I was 7. And I remember when the invitation came, I was white knuckling the junk out of that pew in front of me, just squeezing so hard. And if those pews exist anywhere today, I'm sure you could still find my DNA in that pew. And but I just knew, you know, I was lost, and you know, my sin and was going to be my destruction, and I knew it, and I knew that Jesus had died for me, and I knew that there was an accountability to that Savior. And at 7, yeah. I remember the service, and I remember making my way down that pew. Once I let go of that pew in front of me, there was nothing stopping me from hitting that altar. And one of the deacons, Ruben Martinez, a great man, he pulled me aside. We went out in the lobby and just opened the Bible, and that was it, man. You know, I met the Savior that day, and was saved, and have never looked back. You know, have known that I've been saved since a young man. You know, and I know it's not always everybody's testimony. You know, I work in youth and have up here in the church for many years, and you know, some people come to Christ in their teens, and some when they're adults. And but I've been privileged and know the blessing of it to be saved young, for sure.
Amen.
As far as teenage years go, you know, so I was always in church. Always involved. My dad was a deacon many years. So we were always up at church at the building. The church went through a building program to the building that they're in today, and my dad was there. I remember him getting off work, working long hours. If I was home, I'd go with him, and they're hanging drywall, or they're running wire, or they're doing whatever. Always involved, always served. I'd be picking up screws that had fallen out of the workers' pockets, because that's about all I could do. And I think that I had this kind of legacy presented to me that you're saved, but there's work to be done, right? Sometimes it's physical labor work, right? And sometimes it's witnessing work. Sometimes it's teaching and ministry. And I was, again, continue to be blessed and privileged to be able to see it lived out in front of me, from my dad. And I think it instilled a lot in me, and other great men too. I mean, I have a lot of uncles that were in the church, and other great men. Like I mentioned, deacons and people, you just see that they were committed. And even as a young man, now looking back at it, in my mid-40s, I can have a better understanding of why they were committed the way they were. But I witnessed it as a young man, and I'm sure there was plenty of times where it was like, why are we up here again? Like, what are we doing here? Why are we always here? Probably the way that my kids felt growing up, right? Why are we always up at this building doing things? But anyway, we had a pretty small church, not a whole lot of people in the youth group. In fact, I think my dad filled in as kind of like the Sunday school teacher for high school, middle school, but we didn't really have, not like a youth group like we do here. We would go to events here and there and other stuff with youth. We had camps, that kind of stuff. But, looking back on that now, I think I don't know if it was just limited resources or limited attendance or what it was, but it wasn't as prominent as what we tried to, put forward today for our youth in our church. And I will also put the caveat on here, the disclaimer that I may not also have a great memory of everything that ever happened when I was a kid. Anyway, so as a young man, I'll tell you guys in high school, I don't know that I was as tethered as much as I should have been, like not really like sold out to the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I think if I'm doing an honest gut check, and I've talked about this with, our youth and my family, but I think probably I was more concerned with popularity, relationships, those kind of things, not really the spiritual condition of my friends and those that I was around. And so I think that's reflective of my high school years, right? Played sports, involved in what I believe was popular things, all the things that seem like they matter so much when you're 16 years old that now you look back on and you're just embarrassed like that was ever something that you cared about, right? I've got a few friends from high school still that I talk to every now and again, and they're great guys, and I'd love to connect with them, but those aren't the most meaningful relationships in your life, right? And I think anybody post-high school understands that might be listening, that there might be some lifelong friends that are built there, but most of your friends, if you're plugged into a church, I mean, our pastor talks about it, and I'm sure you guys have sensed it too, but my closest friends are people we do ministry with.
Yeah.
This is the inner circle, right? Jesus had 12 followers. One was the worst, He had 3 super tight, close men in that group, and I think there's probably some modeling to look at there. As you think about, like, in my darkest time, if something bad happens, who am I calling, right? Yeah. Now, I've been fortunate to have a bunch of kids, and so I've got built-in helpers, right? We need to bury a body, call the family, right? Whatever it is, right?
Just name a place and when we're there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think I think that can, like you said, I think a lot of us can relate to that. Looking back at high school years, it's just, even if you did, like you said, and like your background that you come from, I'm kind of the same, grew up in a Christian family and all that kind of stuff. But man, high school, so many things just grab your attention that seem so much more important at the time. And you're right. It's, you look back and you're like, and I don't talk to any of those people anymore. Like, I can't think of a single person that I knew in high school that I still talk to. But like you said, and you look around at the friendships that we forge in our churches and things like that. And I mean, some of my church family is closer than my actually family most of the time, which is, that's no slight to my family, but it's just, it's the bonds that you make that the Lord allows you to forge that become the most important thing. So I think that's good, looking back at stuff like that and realizing could have done that better.
You know, I've heard like the conversation, like if I could go back in time, what would I do different? And I don't think a lot of people would want to go back to like middle school or high school. Like it's a terrible time, you know, of just development and maturing and that kind of thing. But if I had to, and I had no choice, I don't think I would be too opposed to doing it. With if I could have my mindset that I have today, right?
Yeah.
To be like a soul winner, you know, to be like really focused in on the things that don't matter, you know, understanding that you're not mature enough to know, you know, and I think that partly, and we'll get to, you know, stuff that's happening today in life, but I think part of it being a youth minister is understanding that, you know, like, hey, these relationships, maybe something becomes lifelong. Maybe you've got Christian friends that you do life with, and maybe some people are blessed to have that, but most of these it's a season. You know, we're not promised that every relationship that we're going to come into our sphere of influence is going to last a long time.
Yeah.
In fact, some may just be days, weeks, months, you know, and so it has to be powerful, you know, like there needs to be intentional purpose, you know, in every relationship. Some may be a lifelong relationship, but most will not be.
Yeah.
So if you're a high schooler listening, you know, think about eternal things, not just am I popular, right? Because at the end of the day, who cares?
No, I think you're absolutely right. You know, a lot of the people that, you know, granted, I went to a very small high school, but I don't talk to any of those people. I mean, through all the classes in high school and whatever, I don't talk to a single one of those, right? I mean, the majority of my friends are members of this church, right? Who are part of this ministry or the music ministry or just here involved in the church.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think you have to be careful, right, when you're looking at your past, because it's easy to be filled with regret, and it's easy to say, yeah, if I had the opportunity, I'd go back. And this is going to sound kind of cliche, so I'm warning you now. But those things have made you who you are, right? So like, you know, yeah, hindsight 2020, right? You'd wish you can go back and live more for Christ when you're 16, 17, 15, whatever. But those experiences, right? The reflection that you've had later in life, in your 20s or 30s, on that darker period of time in your life that you weren't as on fire, may have, you know, ended the solution of that, or the effect of that was where you are now.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
There's duality there.
Yeah. And I think in that context of that thought process, although it is very cliche, Kyle.
Very cliche.
I think that you look at it, if you look at it through the lens of God's like grace and his provision in your life, you know, that this may not have been an important thing to me when I was younger because I was just too immature to realize the significance of it. Now, in his ability and his grace and his love for me, he allows me to use it now to hopefully impact someone else.
Yeah.
That maybe they can pull that skill set and that just that sheer desire to be a more impactful Christian younger, right? Pull that forward in their life, you know, as opposed to I have to go through the school of hard knocks and realize I'm a knucklehead and then, you know, eventually get serious, you know, like many Christians do, right?
But it's helpful, right? I think it's one of the better utilities of sharing your testimony like this, right? To save the pain and later the regret of maybe what we went through, what someone older than you went through.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned a minute ago, and since we're talking about teenage years, we're kind of in that vein about that angel story. And so I'll share that story now since we're talking about teenagers.
Chronologically, that's probably
chronologically it falls in.
Perfect.
There may be no other segue, so we're already in it now. So when I was younger, played a lot of sports, swimmer, played soccer for a lot of years, and we were into mountain biking. We lived in Arizona, and we were every now and again we get the opportunity to go out and actually ride on a mountain. We weren't posers; we were mountain bike riders. And one weekend, it was a Saturday, I believe, and there was kind of four of us that played soccer, and we were probably in the best shape we've ever been in our life. I mean, I'm certainly not in that shape today. I can verify. But we went out and we were riding those tracks, but it's supposed to be like 11 miles through these mountains, and kind of knew it. Now, mind you, just for the audience sake here, there's no cell phones. This is a time before cellular technology was given to civilians.
Was it hard to avoid the dinosaurs while you were on the mountain?
Yeah, you know, just some of them. The pterodactyls were hard.
What year would you say this was?
This is probably 93,
Oh, wow.
4, somewhere in that range. And
Good times.
Yeah, the best of times. Yeah, I remember that.
yeah, well, we were driving, so yeah, 93 or 94. And we took these bikes, 4 of us. We went out. We were all in very good shape. And there's probably a lesson here about preparedness as the story goes on. You'll understand what I mean. But we went out and we had some water, and we had 4 bikes and 4 dudes. And like, what else do you need, right? We're going to go hit 11 miles. That's like nothing, right? And so we started early, and it had been an area that we were not real familiar with, but we were told about it. And this is uncharted for us, but we're told about this track, and you follow these markers, very easy to follow. Let me tell you, it was not very easy to follow. As the day went on, and we were very lost out in the deserts of Arizona, in the mountains. And, you know, like, if you looked at it from an overview on a map, like, well, you weren't really that far away from civilization. But let me tell you, you can be very lost and very close to civilization. That is, those two things can exist at the same time. But anyway, so we had been riding like all day, trying to figure out, we got turned around, trying to figure out how to get back to where we were. We had crossed over at some point, I think, into an Indian reservation or something that was close, and we kept getting like stopped by fences and things. We just couldn't get through it very well. But as the day went on and you didn't have much water, I don't know if you know how the body works, but you need water in extreme heat. It probably affects your mental capacity a bit, right, to make decisions properly. No cell phones, no flare gun, no nothing, right? And so we're riding around all day, something that should have taken maybe an hour to 2 hours, you know, all day, getting lost, getting dehydrated, getting hot. A couple of the guys that were with us blew some tires out on some jagged rocks. By the way, no tubes, no slime, nothing to put in the wheels. Like, we were very ill-equipped for what we had. We were dumb and young, you know, nothing could stop us except this bike ride. And so as the day went on, like it was like sun was starting to go down. We'd been out there all day, turned around, lost, couldn't figure out how to, like, we tried the whole thing, like, well, let's go up to the top of that hill, that mountain, abandon the bike, see if we can see anything. And all we saw was just more mountains, you know, kind of a thing. And,
Wow.
And it was concerning. You know, if you've ever been in a situation like that, I mean, you can have all the confidence in the world, but at some point you start to realize, like, hey, we are lost and this is dire. You know, there's no water out here. We start to have conversations like, hey, if I'm going to cut into a cactus, no knife, by the way, like, how am I cutting into it and what am I eating in this cactus, right? Can I get fluid here? Like, those kind of conversations, you know? And so as the day went on, we kind of decided, hey, there's this wash in Arizona. It's like they have dry riverbeds, call them washes, just sand, you know? And if it rains, they're no longer dry. Right, all the water comes off the mountains. They fill up. It's flash flooding. It's like dangerous, you know. And so we decided, well, hey, let's follow this wash that was wide, and we'll go down this wash, and it has to lead eventually down the mountain. It's the way it works. And we'll get down the mountain, and then hopefully come across a road at some point or some landmark, something we can signify and say, okay, now we know where we are. And so, busted tires. You know, we're walking bikes. You know, it's getting late. The sun has now gone down. No flashlight. We weren't going to be out there, you know, in the night.
Of course not.
Yeah. Why would we have anything? You know, we were ill-equipped. And so eventually we come to this road. We had left the 2 guys with the busted. We were like, hey, stay on this wash. Just keep following our track, because the 2 of us that could ride still, we could be, you know, ahead and try to find something, right? So we took off, and we got to this road, this dirt road, and looking up and down the road, couldn't really figure out where it goes. It's dark now, no idea. Sat there for a few minutes trying to decide, should we go one way or the other? How do we let these other 2 guys know what direction we went? Are we going to put like rock, you know, markers with arrows? Like, what are we going to do? Like, you know, you're trying to figure it out, right? And then off in the distance, long way out, you know, we start to see like the lights, headlights. And we're like, oh, there might be a car coming. Let's wait here. So we wait, and this old Toyota truck pulls up. And before I could say a word to the person in the truck, he tells me, you need to go that way to find what you're looking for, and points the way he's traveling, right, ahead of him in the road, right? And didn't say a word to him. This is the direction you need to go. You'll find what you're looking for, right? And as I've told the story, and Kyle knows it, it's like, I can remember the truck still to this day, the cab that was on the back of it, how the interior looked, but the dude had no face in my memory. I cannot remember what this guy, he was a pastor in the car. Can't remember anything about that person either, right? Other than he told us where to go. And we said, okay. And he drove away. Like, that was the whole conversation. He drove away. So we start going down that way. In the dirt, we drew an arrow in the sand, and my buddy Ryan and I started driving down that way. And his dad had been out there looking for us. He knew that we were lost. Like, we hadn't been back. We should have been back a long time ago. And he found the car that we had gone in. And so his dad comes driving up the road like a minute or two later. Within just seconds, he pulls up. And he's like, "You guys okay?" He had water. We're killing water. And we're like, "Yeah, that truck that just went by, he came up and told us that we need to go that way." So we felt like we were finally getting the right way. And he's like, "What truck?"
But Ryan's dad never saw the truck.
No.
That should have passed him.
It couldn't have gone anywhere else. And so the other two guys finally catch up. We load everything up, and his dad, he had like this old Blazer, super cool, like a '68 Blazer, would be awesome to have. And so we drive down the road now in the direction that we were told to drive in. That the truck with the angels that we had seen, I'm convinced, and we drove down there, and there was nowhere. I'm telling you, nowhere to get off this road, flanked by fences. It's just shrub and brush. There was nowhere, no driveways, nothing. Back to where my car was.
Wow.
And it was like he would have had to pass him. There's no way he wouldn't have passed him. I don't know where the guy would have went. And so, as Kyle teased, that's my angel story as a high schooler that we ran into.
My takeaway is that messengers of God drive Toyotas.
Because they're reliable. They disappear easily. That's what it is.
Random.
Yeah, they can vanish.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Crazy time. So back to testimony world. So life was kind of that way, in high school, and popularity, relationships, not really. I was in church every week, but not, I wouldn't say taking it seriously, by any means. I do have one really good memory of a buddy of mine named Zach, who came from a kind of a rough background. And he, in my 7th grade year, I had this kid. We have 8 periods, and he was in 7 of the 8 periods with me, except for one class. We both had like English or something in like 7th period, but we just had different teachers, And I remember telling my dad, like, "Man, this kid's in like in every class that I'm in," and he looked rough. And at that time, and sorry, Zach, if you ever hear this, but you looked rough. And my dad had told me in his wisdom, he had said, "Hey, maybe God's put him there for a reason. Maybe you're going to see this dude all day long, every day for a school year for a reason." And so then I've invited him over, and he got to know the family, and really was like close, like a brother for a long time. And we're still friends, and we text every now and again on birthdays, that kind of thing. And but I remember Zach, we were at a youth event. We just had this volleyball thing we'd go to, and other churches in Tucson, and really powerful message, and he got saved there. And so I'm not saying that I was a total dirtbag Christian, when I was, but it wasn't definitely as serious as it should be. Truly, if you're sold out and you love the Lord and you're serious about it, hopefully you would have more influence, right? You would have more of your friends in church, and there would be more decisions being made, and you'd see because Jesus has all authority and all power, right? And He is victorious, regardless of our ability. So even in my serious relationship during high school, still through that, a friend gets saved, right?
Yeah. God was still able to use you, right, when you were maybe not as close as you should have been, right?
Not at all.
But I think that's great wisdom, right, from Grandpa, right? He's now gone on to be with the Lord, but he was always had those little nuggets of wisdom. Like he just, one of the godliest men I've ever known.
Thank God for men, fathers, grandfathers, or other men just in your life that have lived life and have learned the lessons and are willing to, distill that down to you and say, "Hey, there's a better way," or "Have you thought about it this way?" And you're right. Grandpa was, he was a great man, still is, with the Lord today, which is awesome. I'm a little jealous. But he instilled a lot of great character traits in me, and quite frankly, we just had a men's prayer breakfast and was praying, and I was kind of emotional, which is like every time, and but my dad was that way, and I remember when I was younger, I was just telling Andrew about this when I was younger that, I can remember consciously thinking about it. It's like, why are you so messed up and busted up here or whatever? And now I'm like the same guy, and I'm before God's throne and just putting petitions out there and just pleading with Him to answer or intervene. And how can you not be emotional about it?
Yeah.
You know, you're not that macho, you know what I mean? Or you shouldn't be, at least, right? You should be humbled by the fact that, you know, that our God hears us and wants to hear from us. You know, that should be something that's significant to all of us.
Yeah. I think I love how you mentioned that one person that still stood out, and, you know, the Lord was able to use you despite where you were at, right? To be an instrument in his life to where he heard the gospel and was saved from that. I can remember just my teenage years, two people, just random people that we were friends with in high school, that the Lord used us as instruments to lead them to salvation. And here we are, you know, 30 years displaced from that. And both of them one of them was from Cameroon, Africa. The other one was from India. Their parents were ambassadors and military attaches at embassies in Germany when we knew them. And they both live here in the States now. One of them lives in Nashville and is like an active member of like this Christian Indian movement. Because, I mean, his parents disowned him when he claimed Christ. But like, he's got a beautiful family now, and the Lord is just using him kind of in this, like, there's this Indian Christian movement in Nashville of like converted Indians from India that he's just a part of. And then the other kid is really active in his church, and I think he lives in Houston. Well, he's not a kid anymore, he's my age, right? But still, like, the Lord just uses those little places in our lives where he shows grace despite our failures to other people. And it's just amazing how he continues to use like imperfect people to facilitate his will.
It's probably a good exercise in all of our lives to be mindful of it, right? And to think back and reflect, and like you said, in spite of who we are and our failures and our shortcomings, that, you know, not only do we read about it often in the Bible, I mean, God only worked with sinners because that's all there is in failures, but in our lives, right? You know, we're failures, we're sinners, and God still has worked dynamically in our lives and has been there. And I think it's good to reflect on that at times. You know, I mean, obviously this whole session isn't about teenage years. We'll get into more stuff here, but I think it is important to kind of look back on that and see that that God has moved even when we weren't. Yeah. You know, he's faithful towards us far more than we've ever been faithful to him. Right.
Yeah. No doubt. I think it's true in all of our lives. I think a lot of people are just the most rambunctious and the most probably rebellious, obviously, during their teenage years. Yeah. So I think we all have similar stories where we can say, well, I wish I would have done that differently. But at the same time, I think you can look at that and say, I also have stories that despite my failures, God has used me, even in those years where I wasn't really seeking him, to start movements like Tom said, or, you know, to bring people who obviously you were meant to have a role in their life. You know, 7 out of the 8 periods, that wasn't an accident, right? I think there's a duality there, right? One of it helps for your testimony later, where you can say, hey, newcomers, hey, kids, don't do what I did. But at the same time, there's a great message of, hey, despite your failures that you're going to make, God can still use you. God will still use you.
Right.
The power of Christ and the Holy Spirit is greater than your power to fail.
Yeah.
So true. It better be. No, I agree with you. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, so as you know, high school would continue on. One blessed Easter morning, 1994, Victory Baptist Church. As a teenager, sitting in the back, so rebellious. Yeah, I'm going to sit in the back.
Back row Baptist, man.
Yeah, and talk and make fun of things. Yeah. This family visited the church, and they had a daughter. And she walked in this beautiful dress. And I noticed her immediately because I was a strapping young lad. And as it would turn out, her father worked with my father, and he was remotely working for like a year in Arizona from Texas. His family was in for the long weekend or for Easter, and Christian guy, and they were looking for a church to visit. And so my dad invited them. They were there. But when I saw her, I was smitten, boys, smitten all the way. And I remember pushing my way through, after the service to just make sure I shook her hand and said hello. My parents were out there talking to her parents, and I'm like, and I'm their son, Ryan Reeves, the Ryan Reeves. And I met your mom, Kyle, on an Easter Sunday morning.
Yeah, I know her.
Yeah, you've heard of her. And anyway, we started a relationship, a long distance relationship. Again, side note for younger listeners, there were no cell phones. There was no free long distance at this time. If I was calling out of my area code, I paid at that time the awesome rate of 10 cents a minute. That was the best rate we could get.
Wow.
And so I worked to talk to your mom, Kyle. That was what was happening. I received a paycheck to be able to speak to her on the phone.
Is awesome.
That was what we were doing. We actually wrote letters back and forth because that was a more cost-effective and meaningful way to communicate, than now. So don't take your FaceTime for granted. The Lord has given you all the tech because he loves you. But we started a relationship through letter writing and these phone calls, and we started getting involved sexually when we shouldn't have, as teenagers. And but I knew I loved her, and we just were not 100% at all on board with God's plan, right? For His method and His better way. We wanted our way, and this is the immaturity that a lot of young people fall into, and as Christians we knew better. But we got pregnant in high school. Hence one of your hosts for the show here.
Hey, shout out to Kyle Reeves. Shameless plug.
But we loved each other. We were young, and that dreaded moment when I had to tell my parents, I've got bad news, and its name is Kyle. No. But I've got bad news, and it was funny. My mom and I were just talking about this the other day when she was here, that she knew like something was wrong. She could tell something in my demeanor was off. Like she knew. And when I told her, she goes, I was wondering how long it was going to be before you told me what was going on, and just loved me in a way that a parent should. Hugged me. It's going to be okay. We're going to figure this out. Because I'll tell you that it doesn't always go that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are told that their lives have been ruined and there's not support there. Now, I will say this. I've got 3 older siblings who are all the worst. My parents had already been through a lot, So it wasn't the first time they'd heard some bad news from a kid, and that was one of theirs. But I remember it was like I was on a lunch break at work or something. I was just home making a sandwich.
Wow.
Like the worst
Wow.
possible
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
You have to go back to work.
So random.
Well, and probably strategically like, I'm going to mention this thing, and I'm going to run out the door, get in my car, and go back to work. And but anyway, my mom hugged me, told me she loved me,
Amen.
and that we'd figure it out. And just good parents, godly parents that realize that it's not the end of the world. That God, I think my parents understood more the long game, that God can still be honored, and He can still win despite our failure.
Amen. Yeah.
Maybe they were thinking through their own failure in their life. Maybe it's like I said, my brothers and my sisters and their failure, or my sister and their failures, and just that God would provide despite what we would do. So Jen and I got married. Your mom and I got married in high school. That great February day, and that was a weird thing because I was like one of 2 dudes married in high school. Note, not the only one married in high school. One of 2 dudes. Similar story. But that was weird. Certainly challenges, right? It's kind of a weird thing, like when you get your cart before your horse so much, life just changes. Kyle's on the way. I was a senior. Jen was a junior, and we got married. She finished up school through correspondence because there was no online, that didn't exist yet. and I finished up in my school. But Kyle came like that summer right after high school. And I'll tell you that even just being 18, being young, you definitely grow up. When adult things are happening, and you're not really, I mean, you're an adult, but barely, by the term of an age. I don't think manhood starts at an age, but life definitely gets more serious and critical, the decisions that you make. But mind you, I think, the story of the next 3 years is a story of two young people, immature, being parents, trying to figure it out. It wasn't always great. By the time we were 21, I think to some level on my end, I felt like I'd missed out, on this. Yeah. All my friends are doing, they're all, in school and they're partying and all this stuff. And I kind of felt that way. And, I won't put words in Jen's mouth, but, I think she looked at it as, she had left Texas. I mean, all she knew was my family, right? I was everything in that world to her. And we had problems. A lot of people had that 7-year itch. Well, we had a 3-year itch. And it was bad. And we got to a place where we actually separated for a short period of time, 3 years, something like that, or 3 months, not 3 years.
I was going to
3
say,
months.
I was going to say, I don't remember it going down that way.
Yeah,
but
3 months.
3 years doesn't sound like a short period.
And, at the end of that 3 months, God had convicted me so much, so deeply, that there was like no turning back. I was going down a path of, living this life, quote unquote, air quoting here, of what I thought was important, but it really wasn't. Yeah. And I can remember, and I'm sure I've told you this story, Kyle, but I can remember lying in bed, not being able to sleep. And I'm telling you, it's a God thing. He would not let me go to sleep. And I was just being convicted so hard about where I was and where we were going. And I think there was this kind of weighted gravity, this knowledge that came in that I realized, if I don't immediately make a change, that I can't go back. It's going to end. That capability, that possibility. My wife is going to be raising my son in Texas. I'm going to be here in Arizona. I will probably just work my way away from the Lord. My life is going to be terrible and without great purpose. Definitely not the purpose God designed for it. Not that he couldn't redeem it, but it was going to be a whole different skew of nowhere near God's will for my life. And I remember, honestly, Kyle, like thinking about what was going to happen to you, and the idea that maybe your mom and I would divorce, and then you would be raised by somebody else, and we would become distant. And the idea of it destroyed me. And I remember reaching out to your mom. She was in Texas already. I was in Arizona, saying, "Hey, I know that I've messed up, and I don't know that you'll take me back, but I'm going to come out there." And I quit my job, and I loaded up everything that I could in my car, and I just left and just drove to Texas, knowing full well that I might arrive at Pop's house, your Pop.
To a shotgun?
Yeah, and he might shoot me in the face, right? You know what I mean? I don't know. But here's what I did know. I know that the conviction was greater than my fear of what the other side could be. And I drove all night and got out there. And through the grace of God, your mom was willing to try. And we went through some counseling, and we lived in Texas for a while at that time, and just really, really leaned just deeper into our relationship with Jesus, right? With Christ, who loved us, and despite our failure in high school, would take our marriage and make it stronger and better. The closer we would get to him, like that old triangular analogy, he's at the top, we're at the bottom corners, and the closer we get to him on the triangle, the closer we are to each other. And it's cliche and simplified, but it's true. It is true. We mended that thing, and again, just in a way that God can do. He can take broken people and put them back together. Yeah. And he can take broken relationships and mend them in a way that you can only look back and say, God did that. It was not in my capability. My capability was destruction, right? My capability was chaos. But God could step in and make something great out of my worst. and pray and hey, praise His name, the Almighty, that He did it, right?
Amen.
And that, He gave willing hearts that could work on putting it back together, and thank God for that. I mean, honestly,
It's like my favorite combination of two words, but God.
yeah,
Like, every single time, but God. Yeah, it's amazing what He can pull together out of our mess, because He doesn't have to worry about whether or not it's our mess. He can get glory in any situation as long as we realize, hey, hang on, if I can stop this situation, repair my relationship with Him, I can repair all the other relationships in my life. Yeah, but God, my favorite. Okay, we're going to press a pause button right here. We've heard the first part of the testimony that we've heard from Brother Ryan Reeves. We're going to go ahead and split this up. We don't want y'all to miss anything. We didn't want to kind of cut things out that were very pertinent to the testimony that I think would be very beneficial for everybody. So we will wrap this up next week. Make sure to join us. You're not going to want to miss the second part of it. We'll see you then.